can sit around and say, well, we have the worst people in Washington, D.C. Okay. Well, I would probably argue that probably not the worst ever, but pretty bad. But where you can make a difference, obviously making sure you vote, but you can make a difference in your community.
Yeah.
And every time when you even say something that kind of throws people off, like, I don't think they should be demonizing migrants, right? And obviously they're not eating cats and dogs.
Yes.
There might be people around you, let's say you're a Republican and you say that are like, well, thanks for saying that. You've kind of broken that stereotype to me, and it inspires. It's like a chain reaction of inspiration. In your readings and your writings, if you ever feel inspired, that is such a good feeling, and it's like a chain reaction, right? That leads to this, and that can start at a small community. It doesn't have to be a guy in DC doing it or a podcaster doing it. It can be you and your own community starting that chain reaction.
When I think about it, it's like you see someone say something that's really offensive, untrue, dangerous, or whatever, just like on social media. Like there's the Elon Musk says misinformation, and we can't do anything about that, right? Even though he lives in this little town. Whereas all his stuff he's moved all his stuff here. I don't think he lives anywhere, but all his stuff is here now. But the point is, we can get really upset with, I can't believe Kyrie Irving said this dumb thing, or Elon Musk said this dumb thing, or can you believe Donald Trump, or insert any person across any spectrum. And then people we know say things on Facebook, and we're like, well, Susie's nice. I don't want to get into a thing about it with her. And I'm not saying you have to get in political arguments, but like there was a person in town that said something really bigoted about someone who is on city council, and then he emailed me the next day asking for something, and I was like, bro, get the fuck out of here with this. We're not friends anymore. Like the idea that these larger trends should only be dealt with at like the federal level. You have to be, you can't say things like that. You don't, I disagree. You have to be it. What's less important, it's less important, these big global things, and more about what you are doing in your interpersonal relationships and connections.
Yeah, and it changes how you feel. It changes the community. And like I said, I actually think, I hope I'm wrong, because it's much easier if change came from the federal level on this. But I actually think that, because I'm long optimistic on America. Yeah. Short, a little pessimistic, long optimistic. But I think that change will have to come from the ground. Because I'm going to tell you, I travel a lot, I speak a lot, as you do, and I feel that there is just this undercurrent that's ready to blow of people that are like, we need somebody to heal the system.
Yeah.
It's going to come from that. And that's a decision that we make every day. It's not a decision that, we've got to wait around for the next president or the congressman or whatever to say, because they're just frankly a reflection of us anyway.
Yes. Yeah, it is weird that the idea that more people have opinions about politics than vote. That is a crazy fact.
It is, yeah.
That 50% of people just don't is crazy. And then those same people go, oh, it's because I don't like the candidates. And it's like, yeah, you don't like the candidates because you also didn't vote in the primary.
Right. Yeah.
2%, Texas is basically hasn't elected a statewide Democrat in 20 years or some crazy number. And so basically whoever votes in the Republican primary picks, and 2% of the state votes in the Republican primary. Yep. So that's who picks the people. And so, look, I don't I'm actually pretty centrist, I feel, but I'm not enjoying either candidate in voting in a you pick which party you're going to vote in Texas, as you know. But I'm picking like an adult between the horrible and less horrible, in my view, because that's my job. Who I vote for in the general, my first job is, can I have a tiny sway over making things less bad?
And that's actually where you have the biggest impact.
Yes.
Because
smaller,
that's one of the things I've tried to do, in some of the political stuff, is we beat a really bad candidate in North Carolina because we got Democrats to vote in a Republican primary. Yes. And it's so weird to them, why would I pull a Republican ballot?
Yeah. Why would I help them?
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's well, you're going to be represented by a Republican. Let me tell you this. Now you have a choice. This guy or this guy who's really bad. And it's okay, well, I guess if I have to choose, it would be this guy.
Yeah.
But that's what voting in a primary does. And by the way, then if you vote in a party that's not yours, you throw off all the political surveys and stuff. And it's awesome. Yeah, yes. It's awesome. Yes. And then you start getting all the mail.
It shakes the very predictable machine and the logic of it totally.
Yeah.
there's a Mark Aurelius writes in Meditations, he's like, stop fooling yourself that you believe in Plato's Republic. Or he says, stop fooling yourself that you live in Plato's Republic. And it's like, we don't live in a perfect system. Sometimes you got to make unpleasant decisions. That's what being an adult is. It's choosing between this delayed flight and this long ass drive. Welcome to life. You know, but then people think politics is like something different, you know, and first off, you have to participate, which most people don't do. There was an election here, again, for city council that was decided by 2 votes. Wow. That's one couple.
Yeah.
Like one couple didn't get up and vote, and it would have gone in a different direction. And then, by the way, a huge percentage of the seats are, you know, unopposed. And so the participation is first and foremost. And then when you participate, holding your nose, because that's what being an adult is.
Yep. Well, I was doing a newspaper in Houston interview yesterday, and I'm supporting Colin Allred in Texas. And
I was going to say, you do have the lucky privilege as a new Texan to now vote against Ted Cruz, which is our great honor and obligation.
That has been my dream since I was a baby. Okay. By the way, Ted
probably
Cruz,
his mother's dream also.
Probably true. He and I have been like Ted Cruz and I have been like mortal enemies on TV since he came to the Senate.
Yeah.
And, you know, I could go into it, but like, you know, he'll attack Obama for not enforcing the red line in Syria, but that was actually Ted Cruz that led the opposition to the red line. I mean, just so much hypocrisy. But I was talking to to the newspaper, and I said, here's the issue with Ted Cruz. When you go into the Senate or you go into a legislative body, your choice isn't, I'm going to vote for perfect or no. Your choice is, I'm going to vote for something that's not that great or no. That's it.
Yes.
And if you want to continually be no and go home and say, well, I'm standing against the establishment of the machine, fine, right? You might get reelected. Maybe people know who you are. He's famous, but you're a terrible legislator. You're a shitty legislator if you never come to yes, because there is no perfect answer. It's like in life and certainly in politics, there's never perfect.
But it's also not even legislation, right? Like, because yes, politicians' job is to Congress and the Senate, their job is to pass legislation, which people totally don't understand how our system of government works. Like the lever of the president is enforcing the law,
right,
and is the final check against really bad laws. But like, policy is supposed to come from the legislative branches, which the legislative branches have decided they've decided not to wield. But what I thought was so interesting about Ted Cruz, and I think this is a larger leadership lesson, it's not that, he fled to Cancun in the middle of a crisis.
Which he did.
Yes. but it's that he said he did it because there was nothing he could do. Like he's not just like, look, he could vote no on every single thing, but be an effective advocate for his constituents and help them access federal service. He could be, there's still a job other than voting yes or no on laws. And what Ted Cruz thought when the state was freezing and the power grid failed and people were dying, like thousands of people cumulatively across the state died. It's just not like Katrina. It didn't happen in one day in one way. So like, we're less aware of the magnitude of that natural disaster. He was like, well, there's nothing I can do. Like he thought the same thing that I thought, but they're like that's crazy.
Yeah.
Cause there wasn't much I could do. He can call the president, there's so much he could do. And he does not understand that that's how it works. So he's just a shitty leader on top of ideologically, he's just bad at being one of 100 people who have certain amounts of access and relationships.
Yeah, and that was the issue with him on that. Like, by the way, just quick trivia note, I was the very last plane out of DFW when that hit.
Oh, wow.
My wife and I were going to Hawaii, and we connected through Dallas-Fort Worth, and I remember getting off the jet bridge and being like, this feels like Chicago in the middle of winter. Like, this isn't good. Yeah. We were literally the last plane to take off. Yeah. Otherwise, we would have been stranded at DFW.
Sure.
Thank you, God. But like with Ted, it's a matter of the Cancun thing. If he'd have gone to Cancun and then all of a sudden this thing hits and he puts out a press release like, I'm in Cancun, I shouldn't be here, I'm on my way back.
Yes.
It wouldn't be an issue.
I've been on the phone with Washington every day for the last, every minute for the last 2 days, blah, 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 blah. But he doesn't believe that government does things.
Right, yeah.
And so, like, of course, and there's a whole strain of the Republican Party, I think, that just that sees government as the enemy and as having effectively no role in society, which is insane.
Yeah.
And then for those people to get in positions of government is bad for everyone, because now there's one less person who can get the government to do things.
Well, it's like chaos is the point with
Yes.
these folks. I mean, I served with like the ones that are now the mainstream of the GOP that used to be kind of we called them the exotics.
Yeah.
And, but their whole point was chaos.
Yes.
And they don't see a role for the federal government unless it's, them. I mean, they love being in power.
Yes.
But they don't see a role for it. They tear it down in the process. And I look back at my party and say, look, the legacy of the GOP we should be really proud of. We freed the slaves. We preserved the federal government. We actually built the infrastructure system in this country under Eisenhower. And I think even the Transcontinental Railroad stuff was Republican. Like, if we could embrace and grasp that, but we have somehow now there's massive political alignment taking place right now, but now we're the anti-federal government party. It's just, it's maddening.
Lincoln, I'm just writing about this now. Lincoln didn't just preserve the federal government in the sense that he was like, no, America is one country and it's indissoluble. The Union Army at the outbreak of the Civil War was 17,000 people.
That's crazy.
More people died in the Union Army at Antietam in a single day.
That's insane.
Than the entire. So he built the federal government to support an army of nearly 1 million people. He passed the first income tax. He built we talk about alienation. He built something that could serve the enormous machine that he had to build to reassert the actual governance of the Union. But the number of things that didn't exist that had to exist at the end of it is incredible. And the other thing he doesn't get any credit for, that if Republicans truly understood their legacy would do, he passes the Merrill Land Grant Act, which is the act that gives, we talked about federal territory, gives huge chunks of federal territory, like Cornell, A&M, all the A&Ms, the entire University of California university system. All of these schools are built on grants that the federal government gave to the states to give to colleges, which built us as the technological powerhouse, which Lincoln understood. He's the only president that had a patent.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he traveled from Illinois to New Orleans on a flatboat, and they get stuck at one point. He's trying to figure out how to get the flatboat unstuck from these rocks, and later invents this thing that would float the boat up above things.
Whoa, that's cool.
Then he walks home. So Lincoln just had this understanding of America and science, and it's not what people don't understand too. The main thing that Lincoln understood, and a lot of the early Republicans did, and I guess the Whigs too, there was one party, basically the Southern Party, that said we just want to own slaves. We want to be left alone. We don't want to support any kind of federal infrastructure that's going to come from our taxes. And the more Western and Eastern people in the United States were like, dude, someone's got to dam these rivers and build canals. And Lincoln wanted to create, Lincoln was a big believer in large federal works. Yep. And that is actually the genesis of the Republican Party, and which is utterly disavowed for this nonsensical kind of libertarianism, for the Texas independent energy grid that can't withstand storms. The Republicans are supposed to be a party of building and making and wielding an effective federal government. It doesn't have to be huge, but it should fucking do things.
Yeah, it should. And we did. So I would travel a lot as a congressman, and I went to Australia one of my last trips in Congress, and they've basically kind of set up public-private partnerships on their ports.
Yes.
And it's that's the kind of stuff we should be thinking through, because what do they do with those infrastructure? With that, they actually make money on that port that they invest in their basically Social Security.
Yeah.
Their Social Security is running a surplus, and it's that's what Republicans should be, is this kind of innovation on this stuff to get more dollars for infrastructure. Actually, so I lived a quarter of a mile from the I&M Canal. I think it stands for Illinois and Michigan Canal, which Abraham Lincoln was part of building. Yeah. And it was built in the 1840s, so he was a lawyer, I guess, at the time. Or maybe he was in the state house, whichever it was.
Or I think he voted for a bunch of stuff in the state house and then as a congressman. And both of these things effectively cost him re-elections.
Yeah.
Because there was like economic crises after,
Yep.
and people were like, look at these politicians spending all our money. Meanwhile, the canal still exists.
It does.
You
It
know,
does.
like,
Go to Chicago.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the whole thing. And it's like, it's amazing to see that. And the thing I respect the most about Abraham Lincoln is I don't know if I could have, like, I like to think of myself as like I would be a stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah.
He every day got the whatever, I guess, telegraph at the time of the casualties of every battle. And he sat there, I guess, in the basement of the White House or the executive building, like stewing over this for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I would have had advisors come to me and say, listen, let's just enter negotiations with the South,
Yes.
right? We'll do fine as a northern country. We'll live at peace, Canada, United States. It would have been hard for me to say no to that, right?
Of course.